that the last edition of the book did not have. I need to talk with you about that last chapter. We need to understand what safety management systems are. That's really going to that's a very significant advancement in aviation safety. So I need to have the time in class to chat with you about that. So I stopped doing class reports for students with accidents. But I still want you guys to have a sense of what an accident causation model is. What I'm saying is, in the past, this section of the class used to be more important than it is now. I don't want to minimize this, but I also don't put as much emphasis on it as I used to. Basically, is everybody...
I have not.
Okay, pass it this way and then back around. Basically, the idea of an accident causation model is just a framework that allows you to place facts. Like, think of it as one of those portable clotheslines like you guys that live in apartments use that don't have a clothesline or a dryer. You know what I'm talking about is that you just hang your clothes all over it, you know. An accident causation model is very much like that. It's just a way of saying, okay, an airplane accident occurred. We can be sure that lots of things went wrong. But how do we think about all those lots of things that went wrong? Well, the answer is we hang some facts about the crew over here, we hang some facts about the airplane over here, we hang some facts about the weather over here, we hang some facts about air traffic control over here, and it allows us to sort our thinking and organize our thinking. Now, the idea of an accident causation model is not that it gives you the cause or causes of the accident, but what it does is allow us to think logically and to think in an organized fashion. That's all it does. It's not magic, but it's very helpful for thinking. And there are 3 accident causation models that are talked about in the book. I'm going to run through these quickly with you. One of them, probably you've seen some before. It's very popular in aviation, and I must say it's very useful. And so you will see writing about it, you'll see examples of it in the world of aviation. So let's talk about these accident causation models quickly, okay? It's important to do this because what it does is allow us to look at many different factors whenever there's an airplane accident. It sounds like a cliche, but it's really true. There are always many things that go wrong whenever there is death, serious injury, substantial damage, or even non-normal operations. Even when we have an incident where nobody dies or the airplane doesn't get hurt, we can still use an accident causation model to look at different factors that went wrong. And it's true always that there are many things that went wrong. So how do we usefully organize them? Well, here's 3 different methods. I want you to know, and I'm going to ask you a quickie quiz question shortly on this. None of these is any better than any other. They're all useful, and it depends on what you like, which one of these you like to help you. And that's why I used to tell the class when they did these in-class reports in past years, pick any accident causation model you want. It doesn't matter to me. They're all good. They're all useful. They're all helpful. So, you know, don't try to cite me out in your report saying, well, which one does he really like? It's not about that. It's about how can they help us think, okay? What we need to do, the reason we need to do this is that our thinking about aviation safety has advanced a lot in the last 50 years or so. And what I'm hoping to do in this class, besides sensitize you to aviation safety issues, is to help you find a way to get a job. And one really good way to get a job in the world of aviation, or actually in lots of other worlds too, the world of manufacturing, all sorts of things where safety could be an issue, is that you know the latest ways of thinking about safety and talking about safety. And using these accident causation models and the rest of the stuff in this class is going to give you a high level of understanding about what safety is and how to think about it. And when you go for a job interview, I hope you'll be able to speak intelligently and knowledgeably about how to think about safety. And in doing that, you will stand out among the candidates for the job. Because, you know, it's really true, you guys you probably have found this out already in your life. My kids have found this out the hard way. There's lots of people who are qualified in life to do almost anything. And what you need to do is to make yourself a little bit better. You need to make yourself different. You need to make yourself a candidate who stands out. I think that discussing aviation safety, understanding accident causation models, understanding safety management systems, the stuff that we talk about in this class is going to give you that extra help, that extra edge. For example, you guys are pilots. Lots of people can fly airplanes, but how many people can talk about safety and talk about safety management systems and talk about organizational factors as ways of improving safety? In the old days, when people analyzed airplane accidents, all they did was talk about the technical factors. Just say, okay, well, what happened with the airplane? What happened with the, what was the pilot doing? Pilot missed the approach and crashed into the mountain because the pilot turned the wrong way. Okay, let's look at the approach chart. Let's look at the actions of the pilot. Those are technical kind of factors. Later, we got more sophisticated in the realm of human factors, and this is the stuff that we're going to talk about next in the class. What is it about human performance? How do people communicate with each other? What happens with the effects of fatigue? What happens with the effects of task overload, task saturation, misunderstanding of processing information? Those are the topics, kinds of things we're going to talk about to understand why people make mistakes. And that's been really big stuff in the last 30 years, 40 years. But recently, and this is where I'm going with this, recently we've gotten ourselves more into a situation where we look for accidental causes more in the organization itself, not in the equipment, not in the people, but in the organization itself. And this may sound really strange to you, but I've got a really good example in these materials, in this discussion, about how the NTSB criticizes, there's no secret, I'll tell you the plot now, criticizes the management of the FAA for failing to run a control tower properly and failing to set up what's called a safety culture, which we will talk about in detail in this class. And so what the NTSB says is the organization of the FAA is really the primary reason why an air traffic controller made a mistake, cleared one airplane to line up and wait, as we now call it, or in those days it was taxi position and hold. And the controller forgot there was an airplane on the runway and cleared the airplane behind that airplane to land, and the airplane landed right on top of the airplane that was on the runway and killed a bunch of people. Why did that happen? Well, I'm going to read with you the NTSB conclusion. And the NTSB conclusion is that the organization of the FAA control tower management allowed that to happen. This is the modern way of thinking about accidents. Is it, yeah, people make mistakes, yes they did. Controller screwed up. But saying controller screwed up is not the best and the most powerful way to talk about the accident. A more powerful way to talk about it, and I will read with you the NTSB conclusion, is that the organization of the control tower, the management of the FAA control tower, did not emphasize safety in such a way that they had procedures in place that would help this controller prevent a mistake that ended up killing the person. So we talk about the organizational factors of the FAA. We don't just point the finger at the controller that cleared an airplane on the runway and then forgot about it. Which she did. She forgot about it. Well, we have procedures in place to help people forget, to non-forget stuff. For example, having flight strips with flight information on it. She didn't have a flight strip. Somebody else screwed up. She didn't notice it. She should have noticed it, but she didn't. The controller who should have handed her the flight strip didn't. How'd that happen? The NTSB says it's because the FAA did not emphasize safety enough in the operation of that control tower. We'll read that shortly. The point is that I want you guys to be sensitive to this for knowledge as well as for job interview purposes, because this is the way we talk about safety, and this is the way we look at accident causation models as well. We say we don't blame that person. blame the system, the organization that allowed a person to make an error. And I'll explain how that works, okay? We do, of course, it's important that we get technical information. You guys are reading 2 accident reports for this class and writing papers on them. And of course I want you to have the technical information in there. The NTSB does in fact look at what was the crew doing, what did air traffic control say, what were the weather conditions, how were the airplanes being flown, who did what, who was on what radio frequency. Yeah, of course, all that stuff's really important, for sure. And the human factor side of it. Who did what, who read back a clearance wrong, who failed to monitor instruments, who failed to communicate effectively between a captain and a first officer in a corporate jet. What should the controller have done? Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, those are important too, but we really need to look at the organizational factors around the behavior of the people. So we use the notion of looking at the organization rather than the mistakes of the people as the primary thing that we analyze nowadays in modern aviation safety thinking. To just say, and you'll see this a lot in the rest of this course, to just say that accident was caused by pilot error. People around your lunch table, or you're over 21, when you guys have an adult beverage together and talk about how great your education is here, which I'm sure you do all the time, people will nod their head and say, I get that, the cause of that accident was pilot error. Well, I'm here to tell you that that statement, the cause of that accident was pilot error, is meaningless. The statement, the pilot made a mistake and that's what caused the accident. That statement is meaningless. What we have to do is look at why did the person make the mistake? Why did the person make the mistake? Not did the person make a mistake, but why did the person make a mistake? And the way we talk about it in modern safety thinking is to say the organization around the person allowed the person to make a mistake or failed to correct the mistake, failed to catch the mistake, failed to have a procedure in place for somebody else to double check what was going on, failed to train a person properly, to be aware of various things, fail to provide procedures, fail to provide electronic assistance or warning systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the things we look at when we talk about an accident where it's clear that pilots make mistakes. Remember the Boeing data we just looked at when the days were a little longer and warmer last week? When we saw that so many of the major causes of jet airplane accidents in the last 50 years have been loss of control in flight and controlled flight into terrain. Those 2 big factors. And the 3rd big factor is problems with the runway. You leave the runway, you excurge the runway, you overshoot the runway, you slide off the runway. Of course we can say that pilots made those mistakes. Somebody lost control of the airplane. Somebody had their hands on the controls when they crashed into a mountain. Somebody had their feet on the brakes when the airplane slid off the runway into the dirt. Yes, people did those things, but it's not meaningful to say that that's the cause of the accident. What's meaningful is to say that the organization in which that event occurred failed. The organization failed. And I'm going to try to show you that. This may sound like crap to you, but it isn't. It isn't. It's important stuff, and I hope you get the idea. I hope you will discuss this in a job interview. If somebody says, well, why should we hire you? You say, well, because I have skills and I have knowledge about how to think about safety. People say, well, really, what's that? Well, I understand that organizational factors are really what counts. And that if I'm hired in your organization, I would like to work with the safety efforts here to make the organization more effective in preventing accidents and incidents. If you speak like that at the job interview, they're going to put a check mark by your name and invite you back for a second. Lots of people can do stuff. Lots of people can fly airplanes or whatever. But what I want you to get is a sense of this importance of thinking about how to think about safety and how to speak about it. Okay? So let's take a look at these accident causation models. to give you an idea of what I'm trying to say. These are three big ones that are used in aviation. A very famous model, some of you have probably seen this before, Swiss cheese model. And there's a thing called the Shell model, which is an International Civil Aviation Organization model. And there's a model called the 5M model, which goes back about 70 years in industrial safety, factories, automobile plants, and things like that, construction sites. But we use those all the time. Let's talk about the most famous one first. There's a famous psychologist, I believe he is still alive. I should check this. He's retired a few years now in England. He taught his whole career at the University of Manchester, the home of Manchester United, the most famous soccer team in the world. I don't know if you ever went to the games or not. But his name is James Reason. And he wrote a very, very well-known book on aviation safety called Human Error. Now, do you notice the diagram on the cover of this book? Do you think this book might have something to do with aviation? What's this a picture of?
Early attempt for man to fly.
Yeah. Possibly Icarus, although the feathers are not glued with wax on the arms. But, yeah, early attempts to fly. You guys see lots of comedy videos of people diving off rocks and all, all that stuff like that. But this is an important book. It's been around now over almost 25 years. His main point is what I've just been haranguing you about. When accidents happen, human mistakes cause accidents. Yes, we know that. People screw up. We just said that. But the reason people screw up, he says, is because of a human organization that failed and allowed that person to make a mistake. The organization failed and allowed the person to make a mistake. The organization failed and allowed the person to make a mistake. Okay? So, if that's the case, then you say, yeah, we know a person made a mistake. Yes, indeed. They screwed up the instrument approach. That's true. They turned the wrong way. Yes. They landed too fast down the runway. They made an error in judgment and tried to land when the crosswind was too strong. Yes, a person screwed up. We know that. But why did that person screw up? That's the important question. Why did that person screw up? James Reason's answer, because the organization that the person was working in failed. And because the organization failed, the human made a mistake. See how this plays out, okay? What we do is we look at the event and the organization both. When we do an accident analysis, we look at the technical event, what happened, give me information, and then we look at the organization. Who's in charge? What is their safety culture? What fail-safes do they have in place? How much emphasis does the management put on safety? How good is the training program? How good is the monitoring program? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are organizational questions. How does the place run? Okay? And, says James Reason, the most meaningful way to improve safety is to not shake a finger at somebody and say, you better do better next time, assuming they're alive after the accident. Or to tell other people, other pilots, like this is a room full of pilots, you guys better learn from that mistake and not make the same mistake again. That's not the best way to improve safety, says James Reason. Instead, what you do is you change the organization. You fix something in the organization so that everybody will have improved safety in the whole place. You change the training program. You reorganize the company. You do something different with your check air people. You revise checklists. You install warning systems in airplanes. You have crews learn about crew resource management and practice verbal communication skills. Those are organizational changes that James Reason says is the best way to prevent future human mistakes. Don't just say, you guys better learn from this stupid thing that somebody else did, but change the organization itself to make it safer. That's how it works, okay? This is very popular in aviation. You'll see this a lot. Some of you, when I show a couple slides, you've probably seen this before, and that's good, okay? What James Reason says is that not only do you have the technical factors in an accident, Okay, let's get the weather, let's talk about air traffic control, let's talk about the airplane design, let's talk about maintenance, let's talk about what the crew was doing, etc. Okay, yeah, we need all that information. But oh, by the way, what is the management structure like? What are pilots told? What's the safety culture? What are people trained to do, and then what do they really secretly do, and does management know about that? Those are what he calls hidden factors, latent factors, unrecognized factors. That what he says is important is looking at the management structure of any organization where there's been an accident, whether it's aviation or the world of trucking or the world of construction or the world of manufacturing. These kinds of safety models permeate the world where people get hurt or killed doing stuff, or property gets damaged doing stuff. So if you can adopt this kind of thinking for any setting where people get hurt or killed or stuff gets damaged, you can improve it. And I believe in this strongly, you can probably tell. So what he says is analyze the visible stuff. There's the wreckage. Here's the flight data recorder. Here's the cockpit voice recorder. Yeah, go into all this stuff in great detail. But also, what's the management doing? Interview other people, interview the management, look at their training program, read their mission statement, interview people who work there, find out what's really going on. That's what's important. Okay? Sure, people make mistakes. Everybody in the world of safety, and you guys are dying to know that people cannot perform properly 100% of the time. We start with the assumption in this class that you'll never have perfect human behavior. You'll never be able to get people to be perfect. If you wanted people to be perfect, use a computer instead. Okay? And even computers fail, as you know. Right? People can't ever do things 100% right. How many of you are pilots in here? How many of you can honestly tell me that you have flown a 100% perfect flight? Good. I see no hands going. Good. I don't want you to think you ever have, because you haven't. You've never done everything perfectly. You misdialed on the radio. You put the flaps down going a tiny bit too fast. You rolled out on your heading 10 degrees off. You wandered on your altitude 200 feet instead of less. I know that. I've done that too. I soloed in 1968, and I have never in my life flown a perfect flight. And I've done a lot of jump seat observations back in the old days when you could do it. You can't anymore. After 9/11, I'm so terribly sorry about that, unless you guys work for the airline myself. And there's a few exceptions to that. If you're an air traffic controller, or if you guys can find a way into an organization like an air ambulance operation that will let you ride along, which is pretty rare in the business. But I've done a lot of airline jump seat observations through the years. I've never seen airline pilots fly a perfect flight. Somebody's always screwing things up. Now, most of the screw-ups are not big deals. Most are not. But sometimes they are. So we start from the assumption that people are always going to make mistakes, okay? Never going to have 100% human reliability. You just can't do it. So when there is an accident, you can be sure at least 2/3 of the time that you can point a finger at a visible human mistake. Someone mishandled the throttles. Somebody failed to engage an autopilot. Yes, point at what people did. You can do that. And you're going to be right, because people don't operate 100%. Machines do when they're working right, but you can't always count on a machine to work. If you want to fly an airplane precisely, use an autopilot, don't use a person. And in fact, some of you may know this, when you get into very, very, very low weather conditions where the visibility is less than half a mile, you know airliners can still fly in that. Many of them can, if they have the automatic landing capability built into the autopilot. Well, the FAA allows airliners to land if they have 2 autopilots that are functioning properly, but they won't let human beings land an airplane when the weather's that bad. The FAA demands that the automatic pilots will land in the investment category in weather conditions. Do you guys know that? They don't trust people. The FAA knows that people can't fly in this approach as precisely as an autopilot can. That's no knock on you or me, I can't fight with leader, but when I push engage and when the autopilot's working perfectly, I can sit there and watch it work. My job then becomes to take over and do a missed approach if the autopilot is off or if it fails. That's my job. So I'm monitoring the equipment, and that's the only way the FAA allows airlines to fly in very, very, very bad weather. In fact, clear down to 0, 0, 0 weather. And I've done this in a 777 simulator a few times. You set it all up, it does an automatic landing, it steps on the brakes, retards the throttles, idle. And in the simulator, when they raise the clouds, you can't see anything out in front. You don't even see the stripe of the runway with 0, 0 weather. And then when they lift the clouds, the airplane is sitting right smack in the middle of the runway at a dead stop. It's amazing what an autopilot can do. People can't fly like that. But we still know that people should be in charge of the decision making, and even the decisions can be screwed up with physical activities or not. Okay. What James Reason's Swiss cheese model is that failures have to occur at a lot of different places in an organization and with people's actions or inactions. And when all these failures line up in a particular way, that's when an accident happens. Let me show you. You've probably seen this kind of diagram before. This is why it's called the Swiss cheese model. That there are things that go on all the time, most of which work out okay. But there are holes, literally holes in procedures, holes in human behavior, holes in human actions, holes in communications, things that can go right. But only when all the holes line up correctly, or not correctly, when the holes all line up, is when you have an accident. Now notice, the way that the Reason model is always portrayed is what I'm telling you about the organization having the most emphasis. What James Reason says is that decision makers may have screwed something up, and by this we mean the management of the company. They may not have emphasized safety enough, for example. They may pay such poor salaries that people who would have good skills are not working there because they're not attracted to the place. Or the company itself has a bad reputation because of the way the management runs it, so good people choose to not work there.
I got this from my airline dispatch teacher. There was an airline that actually paid you for the amount of landings that you made. So if you didn't make enough landings, you didn't get a big paycheck, so you encouraged it to as many.
Yeah, so, you know, the weather's questionable, or you're not sure if the left engine is running just perfectly or not, but hey, if I don't go, I don't get paid, so I'm gonna go. Is that the smartest thing to do? I don't think it is either. Okay? But that's an example. It's a good example of a management level decision on how we structure your pay. Then, says James Reason, so his point is that's always there. And in an accident investigation, you always have to look at what the management's doing. Now, maybe you wouldn't think so. You know, I'm going to give you this example from this crash where the airplane landed on top of the other one on a runway as an example of this, and the way the FAA got dinged by the National Transportation Safety Board for its management failures. Okay? So James Reason says always start by looking at what management does or doesn't do. Start there. Okay? Then you also need to look at line management. This isn't upper management, this is day-to-day stuff. Okay? What are the supervisors doing? Are they paying attention? Are they enforcing rules? Are they doing proper safety checks? Are they supervising their employees correctly? Are they pointing out problems that are they effectively speaking between management and the workers? What is the day-to-day line management doing? And all you guys have ever had a job in your life, you worked for a boss who's, let's say, probably a line manager, unless you worked at a little place where the manager was also the owner. That's not too likely, but maybe. And you always know that your boss is capable of making a lot of mistakes, right? In fact, didn't you think about your current job or some past job you've had? Don't you think that your boss is an idiot? Really, I mean, don't you? Boss doesn't know what's going on out there in the front. Boss doesn't know what the customers are angry about. Boss doesn't care. You tell them something doesn't work right and say, I can't do anything about it. right? You ever work in an environment like that? That's kind of typical. That's what James Reason calls line management these days. Not upper management, but day-to-day supervision. Then James Reason says, the third layer where there might be holes, or there are holes, there are always holes, there's never not holes, are what he calls preconditions. Okay? What happened here today? Was the pilot maybe very tired? Was the scheduling bad? Was the weather bad to where the flight yesterday was delayed, so the pilot got in late, and therefore the pilot's tired today? What else is happening? Is there something wrong with the airplane that wasn't fixed already?